Resuming debate, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm pleased to speak on Bill C-29, an act to provide for the establishment of the National Council for Truth and Reconciliation. And I want to begin by acknowledging that we're gathered here on the traditional unceded lands of the Algonquin peoples. And I want to, at the outset, Madam Speaker, really acknowledge the incredible work of many of my colleagues in the House from the different parties, including the member for Sydney Victoria, who's the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations, the member for the Northwest Territories, for Nunavut, for Winnipeg Centre, for Edmonton, Griesba, and others who, over the many years we've been here, have really been inspirational in their work and their advocacy, and also to make sure that that we, as a government, move forward on reconciliation. As you're aware, Madam Speaker, reconciliation is multi-layered. It's often complex, and is an issue that I think will take generations to achieve in Canada. Canada has gone through 154 years of colonialism and deeply rooted legislation that often disempowered and displaced First Nations, Inuit, and Métis across Canada. We have gone from having over 90 Indigenous languages to one where only a handful are spoken today. We've seen the horrific results of residential schools, intergenerational trauma that it's created, and the lasting effects of the hurt and the loss. And we saw this with unmarked graves starting last year, and I suspect we'll see it again and again and again as we unpack this deeply hurtful issues over the next few years. And as I do want to acknowledge that Parliament recently acknowledged what happened with the residential schools as genocide, and I think that too is a very important aspect of moving forward and speaking truth to power. As we look at establishing the National Council for Reconciliation, I do think it's important to look at the history. So if we look at 2015, when we took office, the commissioners of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission presented their findings, all 94 calls to action, in December of 2015. And they outlined the bare minimum that needs to be done in order for our path of reconciliation to move forward. And we know since then we've seen a number of different initiatives, including the report of the MMIWG, the Missing Murdered Women and Girls report, and the calls to justice, as well as several other very important findings, including the unmarked graves, which pose additional responsibilities on the government and all Canadians to address. With the 94 calls to action, it is an all-encompassing set of guidelines, both for the federal government, provincial governments, in some cases municipal governments, organizations, national Indigenous organizations, as well as all other Canadians. And I think it's an important recognition that reconciliation is not a journey that can be just undertaken by Canada as a government. It needs to be an all of Canada effort, including all stakeholders. Of course, when we talk about reconciliation, oftentimes we talk about what Canada is prepared to do, but it really comes down to how much trust and confidence Indigenous people can have in this process. And what we've seen in the last 7 years is, while we've moved ahead on a number of very important initiatives, we've seen this relationship to be oftentimes 2 steps forward, 1 step back, because there is a lot of unpacking to do. And as we approach and encounter these issues, I think it's important that as a government we double down and recommit to working harder to ensure that that we do move forward on this process. And it's an imperfect process. It's an imperfect set of, I think, ideas that oftentimes may need reflection. And in that, I'm just pleased to just share with you some of my experiences over the past, I would say, 7 years, working across party lines with our members opposite. And I do want to start off with our work on Bill C-262, which is a private member's bill brought forward by my friend Romeo Saganash, which essentially called for the implementation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And I was fortunate to work with Mr. Saganash over the couple of years he was actively advocating for 262, and we in fact traveled a fair bit in our committee work and spoke to many individuals, young people, elders, band councils, Indigenous organizations, and the enormous support that it had across Canada, I think, within Indigenous people, I think was remarkable. And what we saw, however, is that the same level of commitment was not here in our parliament. And I think over time, sadly, 262 didn't pass, but we were able to get C-15 through Parliament in 2021. And basically, it is calls to action 43 and 44 that we were able to pass. The second part of UNDRIP is the implementation and a national action plan, and our department is working very hard with Indigenous partners, national Indigenous organizations, as well as rights holders and many others to make sure that we have an action plan that can really address the review of laws and move us forward on this path. I believe, Madam Speaker, one of the things that really humbled me is the work on Indigenous languages. It's an Act, C-91, that again passed, I believe, in 2019, and it was a critical moment in Canada, because I think when we talk about language, it is so fundamental to all of us. And oftentimes I look at the passion in which my colleagues from the Bloc Québécois address the issue of bilingualism in language, the passion with which many of our colleagues in this side speak about the need to protect the French language. I think is so critical, and to ensure that linguistic minorities are protected across Canada. But oftentimes, missing in that conversation is the need to protect and in fact to save many Indigenous languages that existed prior to Confederation. And in many ways, it's in the last stages of in medical terms, it's on life support, because we have so many languages that are at such a point of being lost permanently. And I know that the member from London, Fenshaw, from London, spoke about the Oneidas of the Thames, and it's one of the groups that we met during the development of Bill C-91, and it was devastating to see that only a handful of people were able to speak that language today. So it's so important that C-91 is there, as well as mandatory minimum penalties that were repealed just last week by us, along with the support of the New Democratic Party, as well as the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. These are some measures, I think, that speak to the work that's been done, but there's a lot more to do, and I believe the National Council is a very important tool for us to measure objectively what the work we need to do, to measure and to report back to this House, as well as to Canadians, on the need to fill in the gaps and to make sure that we fulfill all the commitments and in the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Madam Speaker, I look forward to questions and comments from my friends, and I thank you for this opportunity.
Comments?